connecting to the internet.
Internet.
Networking software.
World Wide Web thing on a computer today.
Computer.
Net Surfer Pro.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Net Surfer Pro, a whirlwind ride through the World Wide Web. I am your guide, Matt, and with me is...
Ohayou gozaimasu. Watashi namae wo Galen desu. Gotrosu arigatou gozaimashita.
So, that is our sort of, our cue to say that this is our first episode on an anime that we've done.
Oh, wait, it is? I was just speaking my native language of Japanese.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Can you say anything else?
Doki doki.
Doki doki desu ka? Ore wa penguin dakara.
I can say kawaii, which is different from kowai. Don't say kawaii because it's near kowai, which is ugly or like displeasurable.
I feel like this is nearing a very bad joke. Like this feels like we need to steer very carefully here.
Indeed, we do.
Or
but
else
yes,
we will
are doing an
crash.
anime.
And we are talking about something that has a lot of crashes in it. I was trying to think of a better cold open. It is very cold outside, though. It's
yes.
It's currently in the throes of negative Fahrenheit over here.
Yeah, we are. The U.S. is experiencing something that has been referred to on Twitter as microwave burrito syndrome, where the exact East Coast and the exact West Coast are fucking boiling. And then everywhere else, including Texas, the big American place that's hot all the time, negative degrees Fahrenheit or negative degrees Celsius, depending on where you are.
Yeah, that's microwave burrito syndrome is a really good way to put it. It's very cold in the middle, which is, of course, yeah, it's quite something. But if you're snowed in and looking for something to do, we're covering a fairly short series from last year, from 2020, 12 episode long anime series. I guess I'll go ahead and get into the fact corner because we are talking about, in case you couldn't tell from the title, Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. So it was originally a manga series written by Sumito Owara, but we're specifically talking about the anime adaptation, which was created by the studio Science Saru. Science Saru was founded by director Masaki Yuasa, and that is the director for Eizouken. It was one of their final directorial projects. You might know their other recent one from 2020 as Japan Sinks. The studio is also responsible for Ping Pong the animation and Devilman Crybaby. There were a few feature-length films they did as well, and they've done episodes for Adventure Time and OKKO, interestingly enough.
Very interesting.
I bring up the like studio behind the anime specifically because this is an anime about animation and the creation of anime.
Yes. So this is going to be structured like a joke, but it's not a joke. This is a very serious thing that I thought going into this. I assumed that the title of Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken meant that the three titular schoolgirls were like all crushing after the same guy whose name was Eizouken. That is not what this anime is about. Nope. Eizouken is actually Japanese for film club.
Yeah, or like film study, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the general sort of plot outline is that there are three main characters here. There is Midori Asakusa, who is a freshman at a high school who really likes anime and world building. She's also super anxious, but she loves like exploring and writing details about the world around her. And then her friend Sayaka Kanamori, who is also a freshman at the time of the series starting, who is all about like money and management, is very serious and cynical. And then they meet the character Subame Mizusaki. Yeah, Subame Mizusaki, who is a model slash actress who is like really popular, but who secretly wants to make anime. And together, the three of them form the Eizouken, which they kind of use the name as a front, because at first they are told by a teacher that they can't make a new club to produce anime because there is already an anime club. But the anime club they have at the school is like anime research and not anime production. So they're like, no, we're a film club. We're going to make movies, just, not live action movies. It's specifically also because Mizusaki's parents don't want her to join the anime club specifically. So what happens then is they kind of go through the stages of anime production, from like starting with basic concepts to actually animating and writing and structuring a storyboard, and then, producing the final project. Throughout the series, they make 3 individual like short movies, each with sort of a different purpose in mind. And so it follows their progression from like their first project all the way to their last one, which starts involving like the entire city around them.
Yeah. Can we talk about the city very briefly? Because
so
the letter of the prompt of the show is the 3 high school girls make anime, but the world that they are in is in and of itself very imaginative. So what sparks the initial want of Asakusa? I'm going to use her last name because that's what they refer to them as.
Yeah.
What sparks the initial joy of Asakusa is like she wants to be an explorer when she's very young, and she gets a lot of mileage out of exploring just her own hometown because it's very like labyrinthine and winding, and
there's all these different architectural styles.
Yeah, it's extremely unique. And then she like watches a very amazing anime that like grips her, and she realizes, I want to make anime. But like the world itself seems like a like post, like a sort of post climate change humans have adapted city, if that makes any sense. Like there's a lot of water that flows through old, like kind of now abandoned city structures, but everything has been just sort of built on top of that, like a sort of Venice-like city. So it's like there's a lot of interesting scenery where like there's just sort of abandoned parts of town that's now been sort of reclaimed by various bits of nature.
Right. A big theme in the town itself is this, like, they don't replace things, they build on top of what's there, sometimes to good, sometimes to bad effects. There's a part where they're walking through the town and they pass over a road that has like a bridge going through the middle of it, like even with the road. And Asakusa explains that it used to be a river that they filled in. And then in a later episode, they're going through this like canal system, and one of them looks underwater and notices there's like stop signs and stuff underwater in road pavement. And so it's a road that's now a river. A big focal like background element is this clock tower that they look at instead of the one at their school because it's at a better angle. But then like when they go to the clock tower, it's almost completely abandoned. And it's just, it happens to still be moving. And that like town history is, it's relevant to the plot because of what the characters work on, but it's also really relevant to, I mean, obviously the themes, like I said, but like a big thing is that part of why Midori or Asakusa is so good at world building is because she is really keen on like learning every detail about the world around her. So like she talks about soil composition and like how because she found like a piece of obsidian, they must be near like a lava flow from an old volcano. And she talks about the history of the city and like how adding roads changed the way commerce worked, and like adding a highway kind of ruined a whole like commercial district.
Yeah. It's really good background world building. There's never a moment where a person sort of like directly says like anything about what year it is or where we are even, but it's all very like naturally occurring and naturally like very easy to get by just sort of looking at what they have drawn.
Right. It feels very speculative fiction at times, the way the world is set up, but in a way that's acknowledging the tendency for people to kind of build in spots at a time and not plan anything out. I want to talk just a brief kind of more overview of the series. We don't need to go episode by episode, but we should establish a few things.
Yes.
So when they actually get the club, they have to get a club sponsor. The name of their club sponsor is Fujimoto Sensei, and he's kind of a background character for most of the series. He's very hands-off with the Eizouken. He only really intervenes with them once, which is to say, hey, take a break every now and then. You don't need to work yourselves to death. He often is just shown playing like a Game Boy or something.
Yeah.
There is, along the way, they run into problems with the student council, who control like the budget allocation for clubs. The first major quote-unquote arc is they have to produce a anime to prove to the student council that they are worth keeping. And the student council, it's kind of funny. So the character that has the most prominence in the student council is the secretary, or like the treasurer, and not the student council president. And they joke about that. They're like, there's a part where the secretary visits them like while they're exploring on an off day, and Asakusa is like, whoa, it's the student council president, and she's like, no, I'm not, I'm just the secretary. Like, she has so much like dominance and prominence over the actual president that they acknowledge it.
Yeah, but they also like, the thing is that they also like hint at that. They do a lot of very good like setup and payoff if you know what to look for. Where in an earlier scene they're like getting interviewed by the teachers themselves, and the secretary makes a comment about like to the president of the student council that's like, you know, I think it's like, I think you'd be a great teacher, Miss President, or something.
Oh, it's because Kanamori says like teachers are fools and are hopelessly optimistic or something.
Yeah. But like there's a lot of like setups to jokes that make them better once you realize them.
Yeah.
Or even just setups to like really little things. It knows how to do timing very well.
Yeah. After they prove themselves to the student council, they are contacted by the Roboken, the robot club, into making an anime for their giant robot. The Roboken is a club of people that love giant robots and make a model giant robot, but obviously it doesn't really function beyond like opening and closing. That's like their first struggle, if you will, and it's the second arc of the series, is this robot anime. After that, they meet, or like either after or during that, I think during, they meet sort of an honorary fourth member of the Eizouken named Domeki. Domeki is a audio engineer who went to the school for their audio club, which had like a ginormous sound collection of like different sound effects and recordings of different things. But she was the only member, and she was taking up like 3 club rooms of the school with her like audio collection. And so they got her to join the Eizouken basically as like, if you give us access to your sound library, we'll give you space to put all the recordings. And then after the robot project, they do their like final project that they end up with, where they make a anime for the city they live in as like historical, like it's like part historical tie-in or inspired by history of the city. Part of it's like tourism, stuff like that. it's like part of a revitalization project.
Yeah.
And so then they have like a higher production budget, but a much more desperate schedule. They run into trouble with the teachers because they are selling the like DVD of the anime at a comic convention, and the teachers don't want them to be able to make money off of club activities. The reason why that's such a big deal is because of Kanamori, who is, like I said, this like very financially driven character. But like her it's not just that she wants money because she's greedy, but because she feels like the labor should be properly compensated, and she realizes that like doing something like that for free, you can only do it so much before it starts to hurt you. Which gets me to like my first sort of main point, which is that the series goes out of its way to show backstories for characters, but not just like parts of their history, but like why they are who they are, like formative moments. Every character has, at least each of the three main characters has at least one formative moment to it.
Yeah.
Or to them.
So so Kanamori, hers is the latest, I think, of the three, but her sort of story is that like when she was very young, she worked for her uncle and aunt, I believe, at a like convenience store that was kind of like a little bit in the middle of nowhere. And she did some labor for them and got paid one day, and kind of like that sort of sparked the like desire of do labor, get paid in her. And so she became a lot more generally business minded from that, to the point where like at one point they hand her own like box of things, and they say, if you can sell these, 100% of the profit goes to you. And it like it's a fun little story that kind of tells how she gets so business minded, even though it's stated that like she's not actually great at math. But then like the ultimate fate is that during a snowstorm, she helps keep the store open so that they can make a lot of profit. But then her uncle says, oh, we're actually going to be closing up soon, like for permanently, because there's just too many overhead costs, and because of the highway, nobody really comes here anymore. So it just has to get closed down. And that's kind of what sparks her to kind of always be seeking profit, even like it might seem like greed, but it a little bit is. She sort of like admits that yes, she is profit motivated, but not for profit's sake.
Right. It's sort of like she doesn't only want the others to be working for exposure. Also, there is the fact that Kanamori is very like she's very concerned with like not specifically money management, but with like marketing and like how to appeal to demographics. You know, she talks about like if nobody is around to watch the anime, then it doesn't matter if you make it good. And that's definitely sort of driven by that moment where the shop had to close because they weren't getting enough customers. So, and then Asakusa is at the very start of the anime when she moves to her new town, which is the town it takes place in. You know, she runs around, she explores a lot, and then she sees that anime on TV, which to me looks like a mix between like Castle in the Sky and like an Osamu Tezuka anime. It has like that older sort of art style for the characters, but some of the environments really look like Castle in the Sky in particular. Something I think is really funny is, so the thing that she loves one of the things she loves in this is like this flying machine. It's like this round sort of hovercraft almost. And when she meets up with Mizusaki for the first time, the thing they make is a flying machine. They like design the way it would look like, and it's this very round flying machine. So there's sort of a parallel there.
Yeah.
Mizusaki's formative moment is I guess first it would be that she was with her grandma, and her grandma threw out like old tea in this very specific method, and Mizusaki tried a bunch of times to replicate it herself, and then eventually she tried to just draw it on a piece of paper. And then later she had this like etiquette class where when she noticed the teacher, instructor, whoever, doing these different motions, instead of like physically doing them, she would draw the individual steps. And then when she was watching an anime, she saw one of the motions that she drew actually like replicated in animated form. And so she realized that the motions of anime are drawn from these significant poses that people do in real life. And then there's a little bit where her like looking at the keyframes and the poses helps her like move her grandma around the house. Like she helps her grandma stand off the bed by making her grandma move in a more exaggerated way. So there's this really nice bit there.
Yeah, it's I don't want to be extremely personal, but like I would probably say that Mizusaki's like little character background is probably my favorite, just because I also lived with an elderly grandmother who had trouble walking around, and so seeing that replicated in a character and seeing how she sort of, you know, ended up helping her through her passion was really sweet and really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Very touching.
Right. And she even replicates that tea throwing bit in one of the anime they make.
Yeah.
Which is very nice to see. So yeah, it's like it gives this big focus to the characters, and I think it's interesting that the city's history is so detailed, because in a way it also has this like formative moments for the city involved as well.
So I think one of the things that we also have to talk about is the animation of the show itself is spectacular.
Oh yeah.
And like not just in general, like there's a lot of very specific, very good things. Like the studio itself, if you know anything about Devilman Crybaby or Ping Pong the anime, is like very good at animation. Ping Pong the anime, I have not seen it. I have seen the animation style. It is really unique, and you should probably see it at home, because it is extremely like, it is unlike anything I've seen in a lot of other animation, both from Japan and anywhere else. But with Eizouken, a common thing that they will do, and they do it multiple times throughout the series, is explain an animation principle with the characters and then show that animation principle kind of immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
Like the first episode, I think it's Asakusa is explaining how to do sort of action or like movement to Kanamori, where she explains like how to sort of exaggerate it so that even if it's not one-to-one with reality, it gets the movement across better to an audience, using the example of like the anime that she grew up with. And then immediately afterwards, or not immediately afterwards, is when they see Mizusaki running away from like her handlers or her bodyguards, and they end up chasing her down to help her. And the ensuing action follows a lot of the principles that they just discussed.
Right. There are a lot of small things like that. There's also like they talk about how, well, they have their classroom, or sorry, their club room is above this like shed that they used to do like these older recording techniques with like panning angles. They then do similar panning angles in like a, oh, I should probably mention that pretty much every episode has sort of an imagination sequence where they are in they depict them in like the world they're building or imagining. Usually with one of the characters, mainly Asakusa, sort of explaining what's going on or like showing or talking about a new concept. And when it does this, it's in like a watercolor style with more like sketchy outlines and then less filled in individual colors. And also what's great is that she makes her own sound effects.
Yeah, the sound effects are done, at least at the like start of the sequences, are usually done entirely by whoever is depicting it. So like instead of a helicopter rudder sound. It's them going.
Yeah, it's great. I wish I was in the sound booth seeing people do these voices live.
Yeah.
So in that episode, when they're like talking about this, like how the camera would pan or like move backgrounds, they do something similar with a static background during the imagination sequence. Then they also talk about how to use like animation to show that there's wind being blown, and you can have like lines of dust going through, you can have debris flying around, and then they do that later on in the episode when there's like a big storm. Yeah, it's really cool. They do this with sound as well. Like when Domeki is introduced, they torture her by showing how bad their sound effects are.
Yeah.
One of the things they do, which is one of my favorite moments, is they imagine like a treadmill that Asakusa is walking on, and like it changes terrain, but they all make the same sound effect. So like,
yeah, like
her walking on pavement is the same as walking on dirt.
Yeah, it starts with her, just kind of like running on. It sounds like typical foot on a school floor sound, but then it moves to like dirt, and it's the same exact effect, and then it's grass, and then it's gravel, and like Domeki just gets progressively more and more just distraught.
Right, but then later on in the episode, Midori is like running around looking for inspiration. And so they have this little sort of it's like it really makes you focus on the sound effects. And so like that's sort of like it they bring up like a technique and then they reference it. They also just have a lot of parallels in like the animation and stuff, and then in the anime they make. So like I mentioned, the tea throwing animation is used again, but like there's a scene early on where Mizusaki like falls down a cliff and rolls around, and that's used in the first anime they make. They bring up how Mizusaki is really good at mimicking like motions, and one of my favorite things, which I didn't catch at first, is their final anime, the one they make for the town, has these UFOs in it, and when they move, they expand and contract like jellyfish, and that's because at the restaurant they go to, when they were like first discussing this anime, there was a jellyfish tank in the background. So like even things that are in the background that you might not notice at first contribute to the anime they make. It's very like House of Leaves.
I do think it gets a lot. I think it actually gets a little bit too much like House of Leaves when they measure the inside of their little studio, and it's like a centimeter bigger than the outside.
Yeah, and then a door opens in the back of the room.
I honestly think that the House of Leaves author might have a case for copyright infringement.
No, I mean in like the sense that it draws parallels between the fictional world and the fictional fiction constantly.
Yeah.
Or just the little moments of like people comparing Asakusa to a Kappa, and then a Kappa appears in their last anime.
So to talk more about the animation, but like divorced from how they talk about animation in the show, they use animation a lot. Like they show character with animation very well. This is very prominent in the opening. But actually, no, let's talk about the opening.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It is, it's so good.
For one thing, the song is made by a hip hop duo, Kelmiko, and it is this very like ska influenced hip hop beat. If you put like drum machine over ska, it's
that's actually
very
that's a
catchy.
really good way of describing it.
Yeah. But yeah, so the intro is really interesting because like it's both really complex animation wise, but it also does a great job at establishing the characters.
Yeah. You might recognize it. I think it was briefly a meme where, because at the opening all of the characters do these like various poses. There's kind of like 2 for each, so about 6. And they're very expressive and distinctive poses, so you might have seen people draw other characters in a similar way. But like the the opening establishes their character very obviously with like there's a scene where like the screen is filling up with sort of little indicators of their characters. So like Kanamori is like, she has a lot of like piggy banks and like graphs going up and down and money and things like that. But like there's also just there's two little in between bits where it's their silhouettes dancing along to the music, and I really want to focus on those.
Oh yes.
Those are so there's one where they're doing a sort of like robotish, like walk like an Egyptian style kind of dance, where like Asakusa is extremely hyperactive. She moves double the frames that the others do almost.
Yeah, she like jitters.
Yeah, and like Kanamori is a lot more like subdued and almost a little bit robotic. And like Mizusaki is a lot more flowing. But then there's a scene, like then the second silhouette is them kind of doing a more dance-like dance. And Asakusa then is very like sort of restrained. She doesn't spread her arms out as much as the other characters, whereas like Kanamori kind of does a little like slide, and like Mizusaki sort of wiggles her arms a little bit more in a like very graceful fashion, right. Again, like like it's very practiced.
And I think in that one, Mizusaki has a slightly higher frame rate than the others. Like she moves a little more fluidly. One thing that's really cool is, so at the start when they're all doing like these different poses, in the backgrounds are these shapes, and they are the basic shapes that the characters use. Yeah. So behind Asakusa is a circle, behind Kanamori is a square, and behind Mizusaki is a diamond. It's both the characters' head shapes and their eye shapes. If you count like the fact that Kanamori has flat eye tops and then a rounded bottom, like a half circle.
Yeah.
But so it's really cool because that's sort of both, it fits their characters in kind of weird ways, you know. Asakusa is soft and round, I don't know. But Kanamori is like very hard edged, very straightforward, and then Mizusaki is a diamond. But also it's like animation technique or character design technique in compared to the animation.
Which also, I do have to say, I love how in Kanamori's little character splash, both times she like basically only her face is in the little like section of like who she is, whereas the other two have sort of like their head and maybe their arm, because Mizusaki or Kanamori, because Kanamori is just like gigantic, like extremely tall,
very tall. This show has a lot of really diverse like body types, which is great.
The other great thing is that like it really extends to the background characters too. Like not every single one is completely unique or anything like that, but like there's a lot of little things that they do with the background characters. Like I think the president of the art club almost kind of looks like a turtle, sort of.
She reminds me of Velma from Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, it's Velma with like the one sort of me mouth, you know.
Yeah,
and like the president of the robot club kind of looks like honestly, I don't want to say Shinji.
He has reflective glasses, whereas like I don't think any other glasses wearers have reflective glasses.
Yeah, he has reflective glasses. He has the like wild black hair. He has very expressive faces that are usually like dripping with tears because he's very passionate about robots.
Right. Yeah, it's great.
I also want to interject my my dumb leftist beliefs in for a second to say that
oh no,
this show has very good use of black people.
Yeah, it's like they don't do the typical like kind of racist caricatures you see in anime.
Yeah, it's very black people also exist.
Yeah,
there's nothing like directly racist about it or anything. And like I wouldn't normally bring that up except just the fact that like Japan and Japanimation does not always have the best the best track record
Yeah.
when it comes to that.
But this does a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a pass.
Yeah. I think, speaking of background characters, the school that they go to is extremely extra. Like, obviously, the school is like this huge labyrinth of different building types to make it seem like this big, like, playground. But there's a running joke that there's just a club for everything. There is the Carbohydrates Research Club. Hold on, I gotta find the list I made during one of the episodes where they actually go to have, like, a school festival. Shortwave Radio Club. There's an HVAC club that controls the AC at the school. There is Motor Vehicle Club. Security Club is one that pops up a lot. Whenever there's, like, campus police, it's the Security Club who get into trouble with, or who have, like, a fight with the Transcription Club. And the Transcription Club has, like, crossbows with paintballs in them. They have a zipline club, which is used in the school festival episode when a character is running away from the security club. They have very specific things, like a fried tofu club. It's great. There's so many of these, like, background gags of just, like, a brief mention of a club. And then also, like, the school itself, I mean, I mentioned that it's, like, has all these different styles and architectural stuff, but, like, their staff building is in a pool, or their staff room is in a pool.
Yeah.
Like the teacher's office, sort of. It's just in a dried up pool, and you can still, like, walk out of it.
It very much fits into the theme of, like, reclaiming or using what was once used for a different purpose, but in an extremely fun way.
Yeah. It's really cool. I think part of why that, like, reclaiming what was used for a different purpose is so big is because it's sort of a commentary on what inspiration is. Like, they have all these parts of the building where it's, like, used for one thing and then they used it for another in the future. Or, like, they have, like, these tunnels that snow was supposed to drain into or something, but then they used it for, like dumping leaves.
Yeah.
But, like, then also those become inspiration for their anime. And so it's sort of like it's still getting recycled and repurposed in a different way, but it's still being recycled.
Yeah, it, like, far even beyond the very direct, like, talking about something and then having an action scene inspired by that rule, there's a lot of, like, just the fact that the world is how it is very, like, you have to imagine the writer's room just kind of, like, spitballing little ideas of how this world has been changed and shaped, and, like, the imagination of the characters very clearly is, like, equally coming from the imagination of the writers themselves, because obviously they are getting inspired by the world, but, like, the world itself that they're getting inspired from is in and of itself a very mystical and strange world to us.
It's something I would love to explore in, like, a digital world, like, maybe not a video game necessarily, but
like a like VR chat world or something.
It doesn't have to have mechanics beyond movement. I just would want to go there and sit down or stand up.
Sit down, stand up, turn around.
Turn
back, sit down.
One thing we maybe should have mentioned earlier, but this is sort of a pretty well-known through line, is that each member of the Eizouken is a different part of the anime production process.
Yes.
So
yeah,
Asakusa is, like, writing, directing, concept, world building. She wears a lot of hats, both because she wears a hat. I guess that makes sense. But also, like, I mean, she does concept art and concept design. She's the writer who writes out the stories. She does the storyboards. And then she also has to make directorial decisions, like telling the art club who does their backgrounds, like, what to do.
Yeah.
And some of her, like, main sort of, like, climactic victories are in the form of, like, 11th hour directorial decisions that happen in the face of, like, a sudden error or a sudden setback. Mizusaki is animation specifically. She does like the character animation, and like, you know, all the other animation. Whereas Asakusa like knows animation concept, she isn't shown animating as often. Kanamori is production and marketing, so like actually having funds, securing behind the scenes deals. Like she is the one who gets figured out all of their like publishing, and she also manages their social media. Like I said, she does a lot of like marketing minded things to get people to see the anime. The whole like when she interacts with the HVAC club, she has this whole like bribe like gangster scene.
Yeah, it's like backroom like deals.
Yeah, she's like blackmailing the HVAC club into lowering the AC in the theater auditorium ever so slightly so that people at the school club at the school festival will go there because it's cooler. So she does a lot of things like that. There is a sort of major struggle throughout the series between her and Mizusaki, because since Mizusaki is already popular and already known, Kanamori wants to use her to like, you know, advertise, be like, this is the anime made by the famous model Mizusaki. But
Yeah.
Mizusaki doesn't want that because she wants her animation to stand out for itself. She's like afraid that people will think it's good only because she made it and not of any sort of value or craft. And so they butt heads a lot over that. Just like Kanamori butts heads with Asakusa a lot because Asakusa wants to like take a lot of time or make certain decisions that aren't feasible with the resources they have, whether it's time or budget.
Yeah, each character has a very interesting role with like how social they are and how they like relate to the animation process. So like so for example, like Asakusa is really interesting because she's obviously very antisocial, and she prefers to do things like the world building and stuff like that, and she obviously has a lot of deep knowledge in like how things work. So like there's a scene where she explains like she 100% will not do a laser, like a visible laser, because lasers aren't visible. But she sort of halfway, she like, when Kanamori kind of makes the point of like, this is what people will expect, she meets her halfway by saying like, we'll have other like signifiers that this is how this thing is getting destroyed.
It's actually really great because that's for the UFO war sort of anime, and one side uses lasers, the other side uses like bullets where it shows the muzzle flash and then the impact of the shot.
Yeah.
And so it's like they both kind of get their way by having half of the ships do one and half the ships do the other.
Yeah. But like the fact that Asakusa is ultimately the director and like has to literally kind of mediate between 5 different clubs or 5 different groups of people despite being the least social is very fun. Whereas like Mizusaki, I love Mizusaki so much because she is obviously extremely social, and she has sort of like a model face where she, you know, puts on the smile and puts on the, you know, thank you very much voice for, you know, just sort of interacting with her fans and whatnot. Not that she's a not genuine person or anything like that. She's just, you know, she clearly knows how to.
She has a customer service voice.
Yeah, exactly. But she is also a little bit naive of like how various things work. One of her first interactions with the other two is like she tries to put her card into the washer and dryer.
Oh yeah, she's so her family's rich, and they like make a point of that. Whereas Kanamori and Asakusa come from very like working class families, which they make a point of that. They compare how much money they got as a gift on New Year's, for example.
But like Kanamori is also very. There's a lot of very small, specific things that like she's very clearly antisocial on, or like she doesn't know how other people do things. So like they call attention to how she holds chopsticks weirdly because she's like, "Hey Asakusa, you're holding your chopsticks weirdly," and Asakusa's like, "No, I'm not." And then they compare, and like she's holding them crosswise. And in the animation you see later, you see that like they're eating with their chopsticks weirdly according to all the other audience.
Yeah.
Or how she runs by like punching forward. I love.
It's it's like she kind of, it's funny because her job is to make things look natural, but a lot of her characteristics are the least natural just because she is like upper class, had to go to an etiquette class. So there's kind of a funny sort of collision with that. It's also that even though she is the most social, she as a position does not want to interact with other people and really doesn't interact with anybody outside of the club. During the whole process, whereas like Kanamori and Asakusa often do that.
And Kanamori is also very fun because like she's very antagonistic to kind of, I'm gonna be real, everyone. Like she's kind of antagonistic to Asakusa and Mizusaki. She's often very antagonistic to like the other clubs, in that she sort of like makes everything into a deal, or indeed will like blackmail people to get what she wants. But like there's also sort of the like, you know, management is sort of like the guiding hand that tempers the creative output angle, where like Asakusa at one point wants to like ditch the big robot in the big robot anime for something more realistic, and Kanamori's like, no, that's the one thing we can't do to this.
Something though that's interesting is that there are quite a few times where Kanamori's methods don't work, and they only work by the efforts of Asakusa and Mizusaki. So when they're presenting to the student council, at first the student council doesn't want to give them the time of day, and Kanamori tries arguing, and it doesn't work, and Mizusaki has like, or no, Asakusa has her own like big monologue about like, we put all this hard work into it, what do you know, you haven't even looked at the thing, and that's what convinces them to actually let the Eizouken play the anime they made. And then also when they are negotiating with the robot club, Kanamori is getting very like particular about things, and the club president doesn't want to interact with them. And then like Asakusa and Mizusaki talk about like how they wish fantasy was real life. Mizusaki says she tries to do a Hadouken before bed every night.
It's like the president of the robot club has this very big speech about like how he wishes so much to pilot a massive robot, and like Kanamori kind of lampshades how it's ultimately kind of a lame speech, but then you pan over to Asakusa and Mizusaki and they're completely smitten by it.
And then
it's like
and it restores the robot club's faith in the Eizouken. It's great. So like, and then I think one of the big things is later on, like Asakusa is having a really hard time coming up with any sort of story, and Kanamori's like, you have to come up with this or else we're going to miss the deadline. And they notice that the sponsor for their club was there the whole time, that like he says he has to be at the school whenever they do club activities, which is all the time. And so he's like, you know, people who work all the time should have breaks more. You know, you get more productive when you have leisure time, otherwise you'll just be tired. And that convinces Kanamori to let the others take a break, which leads to the breakthrough that Asakusa has for like what the actual story is going to be. So like Kanamori is, while she's useful and productive, she is, like you said, an antagonist, and a lot of the wins, quote unquote, in the series don't come because of her, but in spite of her. In a way.
It's there's, I can't remember the quote, I can't remember the exact quote. It was some I think some YouTube video that was about like Rare or DK64 or something like that. But a great quote that I remember a lot is like, at the end of the day, while like the producer and the developer have kind of an antagonistic role, they also both want the product to be good. And so like Kanamori embodies the kind of like directed management drive of like reeling in completely unharnessed creativity, but also embodies sort of the negative, like, you know, sort of the negative, like produce, and never stop producing aspect. And it's when she lets go, when she sort of like reels that back herself to like let the creative output be creative on their own terms, is when they get a lot of the big breakthroughs. And so it's a very interesting it's a very interesting thematic tale of, you know, you certainly need the business minded people, but also at the end of the day, a creative work needs to come from creative people who are given their outlet for creativity. And so you can't be always pressuring, always pushing, because they need that time to recharge themselves.
Right, yeah. It is, though, that, like, Mizusaki and Asakusa are perfectionists, and so Kanamori often is, like, the eye of the average audience, like, the eye of the every person,
Yeah.
who's like, no, this actually looks really good, you're just being perfectionist about it. We're fine.
Yeah.
Oh, also, Domeki is audio production and audio engineering, sound design. It's really cool. She's not like fully a club member. She joins them for some things, and obviously she does like the sound production. But she, like, at the end of the series, Kanamori says like Domeki didn't want to join them at the convention because she doesn't believe in group activities or something. There's a cool moment when they are exploring this like river road canal system, and Kanamori hears something and is like, I thought I just heard a ghost. And then later on it's shown that it's Domeki following them and recording them. And it's kind of this cool thing of like, sound design can often just be something you hear but you don't necessarily see or notice, like a ghost. Like, good sound design can feel invisible.
Yeah. It's when you kind of attribute the specific characters to kind of like like the bigger picture of animation, there's a lot of good like subtle messaging like that that's very fun.
Right. I think another thing that's kind of fun is, so they have these like imagination sequences that are kind of they're kind of like the stand-in for brainstorming sessions. And once they get Domeki to join them, she does join in on some of those brainstorming sessions, and it like visualizes the sound. There's one really cool part where they're on like a trip to record the sound of the clock tower across the bay from their school. And then later on, they're like envisioning this big mechanism that plays a sound underwater, and it has like the audio visualizer sort of style of like the sound waves spiking up and going down. And it shows Domeki like she'll take a part of it and like chop it with her hand and then like push it to the side to then loop it. So like it gets her visually, I mean, she interacts with the club in this like brainstorm session way that makes it feel that she's fitting in naturally with them, in that like her input is valuable in the same way that Mizusaki and Asakusa's inputs are valuable to the team. But then also it like visualizes what her input actually would be like, what it would look like if you were editing it.
Yeah.
And they do show like the editing software she uses. They talk a few times about different like software and animation, you know, like techniques you can use. There's a big sort of conflict early on where Mizusaki wants to do all of the animation herself, but she can't physically, like, realistically complete every single frame. So, like, Kanamori recommends doing in-between software, which takes, like, 2 keyframes and kind of creates the in-betweens. And at first, Mizusaki is very against this, but they eventually work it out. And what I think is really cool is this is like an actual sort of concept in animation. If you've been around weebs on Twitter, you might have heard the word sakuga. I'm gonna butcher the explanation, but it is due to the way animation or anime is produced. They will focus on giving like a lot of attention to very key scenes to highlight those scenes. If you see like a fight scene where one punch or one attack is like beautifully animated, or like a character's face like contorting in deep emotional distraught. That is what it kind of refers to. And that is essentially what they end up doing, or what their compromise is like, Mizusaki says like, I want to do these specific cuts myself, and then everything else we can try to like automate with the in-between software to speed up the process. So they kind of reinvent the wheel in that regard, in a way that explains why that practice happens in real life and like why it's necessary.
Yeah.
So another big theme I want to bring up is how a really big part of the series is that creativity is infectious. So when the anime starts, the Eizouken are kind of by themselves. They join together because Mizusaki can't join the anime club and they want to make anime. Then like everybody's against them. The teachers are against them because they don't think it's necessary to have another club for anime. The student council's against them. They get all these reports that they're being a menace. But then as it goes, they start to recruit more and more people to their side. One big thing is that when they show the anime at the like budget consideration, it has like, they play it and then like wind starts blowing and it starts blowing through the audience, and then like a tank shoots a bullet and the bullet lands next to somebody in the audience, and he like kind of rubs his eyes and reopens and it's still there.
It's a very fun parallel because like obviously with the brainstorming bits, it shows them literally in the like contraptions that they're building or the worlds that they're building, but when they show the finished product, it does a very similar thing where the actual anime itself is directly directly affecting the audience who's watching it.
Well, so then when they have the whole bit with the robot club where they get the robot club on board, their allies, then at the like school club, I can't remember what starts it. I think it's just because the robot club was using rockets to promote the anime, and the security club tries to like track them down and capture them. I think there was something that Mizusaki did as well that they were trying to capture her for. I don't remember what exactly, but
I think it was like
she yelled into a magazine, like a megaphone, and they're like, use of megaphones is prohibited.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So then the robot club president has this like box robot on, and he starts running through the campus to distract the security club, and like he starts singing this like theme song. But then as he's running around, like there's a kid that's like, ooh, so cool, and these parents are like, I remember when I was young and full of energy. And then he's announcing like, anime by Mizusaki Tsubame airing soon, and people are like, ooh, anime, I should go see that. And then people start buying the robot box costumes to show support. Yeah. And so like there's a bunch of robots running around, and then it ends with everybody being in the anime, in the theater watching the anime. And then this finally culminates in the final anime where, I mean, actually,
it's like one small detail, just reeling back to the second one of the robot anime, that's very fun is Mizusaki's supposed to introduce the anime, because obviously she's sort of like the face of why they're there, but she's like very dramatically like, I'm very proud of this and I hope you like it too. And Asakusa is like, now is the perfect time to start, against Kanamori, who's like, no, wait, what? And then they start it, and it's just like this perfect, slam cut to the anime as Mizusaki like runs off screen.
Yeah, it's such a good moment. It's like, it shows that Asakusa is like really keen on these details, really good at noticing like dramatic timing, or like she's able to make these directorial decisions. And even though Kanamori was like, no, it's too early, don't do it.
You were saying.
So then, like, one person who saw the anime at the school festival was this, like, ramen shop owner that is part of a, like, revitalization group with the Chamber of Commerce. And then he gets them the sort of contacts to make the anime about the town. And then, like, I mean, a bunch of people from the town get involved, and like people start wanting to go to their high school because of the anime in the Eizouken. And then finally, it culminates with the convention where like a bunch of people buy the anime, they sell out of DVD copies, and then so in the final moments of the series, like the final episode, final scene, they watch the anime that they made, the last one. They finish it, and Kanamori and Mizusaki see that Asakusa is sleeping, and like it cuts to Asakusa dreaming, and it's just like showing all these replays from the series kind of floating around in this big explosion. There's also a literal explosion as like the DVD player explodes, the TV explodes, and then a giant tower shoots up from Asakusa's house. And then it cuts to like other people around Japan looking outside and seeing these towers shooting out from the house. And the tower is a symbol for like creative output. So like there's an earlier part where when they're exploring the canal, Asakusa gets another of these like flashback brain blasts where it shows all these other parts of the series, and then she envisions this like model of a building in her head. And at the same time, like the building is a lot like the building that's shown during the ending credits, which is sort of like the vision of Asakusa's greatest world ever.
Yeah.
And so like there's all these people that are sprouting these towers of land and buildings as they themselves are creatively driven, and like that creativity is so infectious that it's leaking out into the world for people who haven't even watched the movie.
Yeah.
And then the final shot is this zooming pan where it like leaves the club room, and then it shows like the tank from their first anime, the robot from their second anime, the UFOs from their third anime. It has these three like sailboats that are a lot like the ones they had during a specific animation sequence at a bathhouse. It just like, and yeah, it just shows like the world surrounded by these different like vehicles and places. So yeah, it's again, it's saying like creativity and imagination can be infectious, that like one person or one group of people creating something can spawn others and inspire others, and they can inspire others, and that it can make this like this difference. And I think that's a really sort of optimistic look.
Yeah, it's a very fun anime, and the there's this inherent joy in sort of seeing the thing that you've been watching them create come together at the very end of the arc, where you actually watch the anime and like directly see, oh, it's that part where they were, talking about digital construction, things like that. And it's the secondhand feeling of you being a creative person and creating something, and then going back and watching or reading or whatever, consuming it all as an outsider.
Right. It makes you feel proud for the characters.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they did it.
Here's my hot take. Their final one is probably the weakest of the animations.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's fun, it's good, and it still has that feeling, but like just sort of from a raw do I like this or not standpoint, it was the one of the three that I was like, eh.
I definitely think their best is the second one, the robot one, versus the crab doll.
Yeah.
But I think I like that because it also gets into fight choreography. Like they talk about the robot keeping its distance from the crab doll. The monster they come up with, and like the moves the robot uses during the fight. And that's like a whole genre of writing that I find really interesting. But no, yeah, it's like it's the same reason why I think part of why it's so important for them to like make this big world, not only is to show world building as one of the characters does in the series, but it's an inspiring world. To me, it's like I see these like canals, these jungle gyms and labyrinths of buildings, and I'm like, that's really cool. I want to do something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of important that it is just sort of things we see every day with just like very minor tweaks. Just like, what if this underground subway was flooded? what if this junction was, over a massive ocean? It's this, it's the very like, it's incredibly inventive, but it's also realistic in a way that sort of says you could probably come up with something as inventive as this too.
Yeah.
And yeah, do we have any closing thoughts?
We didn't really talk about the ending. The ending's also really cool. It has this cool moment of Asakusa in like a Mega Man outfit, and she shoots a cannon shot into the air, and it explodes into like the sun. But I like the ending because it just has like all of the different concept designs that the characters make for their anime. And so it's really much like wrapping it up like hey, here's all the like stuff they did, but in the behind the scenes form.
Yeah,
kind of like
it's the director's cut.
Right.
Almost.
The last stinger is not just these characters made this, but you can make it too. Here's how. And I think it's cool that they end on that note.
Yeah, it's Eizouken is definitely one of my like top 5 animes. It's extremely inventive. It's extremely fun. It mirrors the creative process very well, and it sort of gives you the insight into the author's creative process through seeing the character's creative process. And it kind of like we said, it ends with this sort of like, by the way, you can go out and make something like this as well. You can be creative too. Anybody can be a chef, as it were.
Anybody can be a chef and anybody can be a critic. Ratatouille. Yeah, it's probably my favorite anime. I think it has everything I like, especially meta elements. It's like my favorite book, which I've already mentioned in this episode. So, but no, I think it does a lot of cool stuff. We even didn't really mention that it's like very funny. Like the dialogue's good. There's a bunch of really good slapstick. Like Asakusa pretty much dies 15 times and is fine. Yeah. They just make a point of like she tries to do something physical and it completely fails, which is also relevant to the plot at one point.
There's also like there's also a lot of like very funny, cute asides where like during their little montages there will be occasionally moments where just like they're just sort of messing around. One of the best being that there's I almost don't want to spoil it, but it's very early on where like Sakusa and Mizusaki are animating and whatnot, and then there's just an aside where they're just in like an inflatable rowboat and like they're just rowing, but they're in the middle of their animation club room. And then like and then Kanamori just like opens the door and they just stop.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is that when they're talking with the audio transcription club and like the security club busts in like a SWAT team, Domeki is there with just a boom mic, like recording it, just recording the whole proceeding. It's really good. There's also like when they actually have to talk to the transcription club to get the DVDs made, Kanamori chainsaws through the door.
Yeah. Oh my god, I forgot about that.
Yeah. It's a good series. It's a fun watch. It's 12 episodes. So like it goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah. 12 episodes, 25 minutes an episode. It's very bingeable. It's very like if you've binged a series on Netflix, you can binge this. And we would recommend you do so because it's very fun. Even having kind of explained the plot, there's so much that you don't get from just us explaining it in an audio format.
Yeah. You know, that would be a good name for like a TV show review series, Breaking Bingeable. And with that...
and on that joke...
I think that's going to be it for our episode. Thank you for listening. You can follow us on social media at Facebook and Twitter at NetSurferPro. You can tweet at us, message us, give us suggestions, tell us what you'd like to see next. Maybe bring to our attention something interesting and unique and weird, perhaps. You can You can also like rate us and comment at us on our podcasting platforms, whatever you listen to it on. I'd love to see any sort of feedback you have.
Yes,
Any feedback.
we would love to have some engagement because we're not running out of ideas, but like any ideas that we can kind of like get from people specifically interested in would be very nice to hear.
Yeah, take some surveys.
Yeah.
Survey says
our next episode is
can I get making whoopee? Oh, no, you can follow me on Twitter at MattCraigGaming, where I tweet about things. Very fun and exciting, I know. You can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/twack, twitch.tv/twak. I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday from about 1 p.m. Central Time to 3 p.m. Central Time, except tomorrow, the 17th of February, I'll probably be streaming a bit later so I can stream that Nintendo Direct. That sweet 50-minute Nintendo Direct.
That's going to be fun.
You can also follow me on YouTube at youtube.com/IEatSonic, IEATATSONIC, where I post videos I make. Big surprise. I do analyses of different types. I do some like stream videos and kind of, other content like that. Mainly analyses, though. I've been doing a long-running series where I analyze The Witness. I've been on a bit of a hiatus from it, but pretty soon I'll start it back up. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Galen Wilson, GALENWILS0N. I tweet out my hot takes and whatnot. You can find me on YouTube at The Only Galen on YouTube. I have been gearing up to kind of make a video. I'm not sure what about, but I think I'm going to start posting things soon enough. And I think that's the only links that I have. With that, arigato gozaimasu.
What is it? Sayonara? Goodbye.
Bye-bye.